Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Sorry we're a little bit late. We were just having a few technical issues, but we have everyone with us now. Excellent. So for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Paul Campbell. I'm a director at Babel PR. We are a B2B technology PR and content marketing agency with a strong heritage in the telecoms sector, and particularly a lot of experience doing work with companies and analysts and journalists at Mobile World Congress and beyond. So I'm moderating the panel today and very pleased to be joined by an esteemed panel of telecoms analysts. So we have Monica Paolini from Senza Fili. We have Peter Yarrick from GMSA Intelligence and Matthew Bloxham from Bloomberg Intelligence. So Monica, Peter, Matthew, thank you very much for joining me today. So during this discussion, we're going to be asking our panelists about their roles at Mobile World Congress, including their outputs, the trends they're interested in this year, and how companies can engage with them at the show. We also want the audience to inform some of this discussion. So we will also be running a couple of anonymous polls through the session, and we'd really appreciate your input towards those. And finally, we'll be opening the floor up to a Q&A at the end of the discussion. So if you do have any questions, please can you just hold on to them until the end, and we'll make sure we can work our way through all of those. Great. So in that case, we'll crack on. So I'll start with my first question. So why is Mobile World Congress still important to you, and what are your main outputs from attending the show? So Monica, I'll start with you if that's okay.
Sure. Can you hear me? I'm still trying to figure out my... Okay.
Loud and clear, yeah.
I think that Mobile World Congress is still the most important event of the year. And it's really the place where I go and I catch up with everybody I know. So, and I guess that's kind of the downside of it, is that I tend to see more of the people I know rather than what's new and, new people, just because I ran out of time. But it's really crucial. So it's not really it's really more of a social, I consider it more of a social event, quite honestly. Which is not to say this is really important, especially after the COVID experience. The social part, it's really important.
Absolutely. Okay, great. And what about for yourself, Matt? What do you still take away from the event? And I guess what are your main outputs as well from attending?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I mean, yeah, similar to Monica, definitely it's a great opportunity to kind of meet up with people that you've known for a long time. I think what I tend to try to do is to stay away from the familiar, apart from the really big companies that I'm publishing on all the time, because you have to make sure that you're aware of what they're up to and anything big they've announced at Congress. But I kind of try to then go and talk to the kind of broader value chain and ecosystem, understand some of the more interesting things that are happening on the periphery that might become more important, and just to try and kind of join the dots between some of the things that big companies are saying and maybe what either their kind of partner suppliers are saying or their downstream customers are saying, to kind of see if it all kind of really hangs together, and whether the kind of hype matches the reality. And for example, good example of that last year, there's a huge amount of chat last year about cloud-based RAN, but actually going and talking to the various players in that ecosystem got a much better picture of what was really going on, what was real and what wasn't. I guess we kind of produce a number of outputs within Bloomberg Intelligence for the companies that we're kind of regularly covering. We'll look to kind of weave in the insights we get from our conversations into that just kind of ongoing research. Obviously, quite a lot of big announcements get made, so we might be publishing something specific to that and what we think that means for the overall strategy and outlook for the company. And then what I tend to do is like a kind of short, top 5 highlights, and so across all the companies I see, I'll tend to try and pick out the 5, sometimes 10 things that kind of really most interested me, and why it was interesting to me.
And where is that published, Matt? Is that on the Bloomberg website, or is that as a report?
The kind of primary mechanism is to the Bloomberg terminal, so which is essentially a kind of closed private network. It's not that small. It's over 300,000 kind of investment professionals. It's sizable. Obviously, my colleagues in Bloomberg News are present there, both on the kind of the quote unquote print side and also the kind of TV, radio. Their content is more broadly available. So Bloomberg.com plus TV and radio. We do collaborate with them. Typically ahead of going to to Mobile World Congress. We will connect and exchange views about what we think is going to be interesting there. I'll help them put together their kind of short list of companies that they definitely want to be meeting and interviewing. And yes, to the extent that there's journalists covering particular stories or themes, they'll push that out, and that will go to a kind of much broader audience, both on Terminal but also Bloomberg.com.
Understood. So how many of those pieces are informed by the discussions that you have versus, I guess, the big headline news that's coming out of a show?
For me, it tends to be more about the conversations I have. I think sometimes a good chunk of what I'll do at Congress is more background. I think it's kind of informing that kind of constantly evolving view of the industry landscape, what's important, what isn't important, how different trends are going to affect different players. So we usually try to kind of push something out that's kind of fairly specific from a kind of investment perspective, what this all means. But yeah, it's kind of, it tends to be more the kind of conversations than the kind of big splashy press news. But obviously, if I kind of tend to find that a lot of those ones, they're interesting product announcements. Very rarely, for my kind of primary audience, do you get a company announce something at Mobile World Congress that changes the investment community's perspective on the day. Are you going to see analyst expectations for revenue or profit go up or down on the back of one of those press releases? No, it's just a kind of broader context of do these announcements fit the strategy that they've been communicating to us for the last 12 months or so. And sometimes there's something that's a little bit different. Obviously last year Nokia rebranded, came up with 6 new strategic pillars, so they almost had a mini capital markets event at Congress.
Right, thanks, Matt. And what about yourself, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard it from both Matt and Monica. I think part of the reason why the show is super valuable is that you've got such a broad swath of the ecosystem there.
Yeah.
Right. So you can meet up with the companies that just do a check-in with them that maybe you haven't seen them in a while. Obviously, you meet new companies, right? It's that mix of walking around, looking at the show floor, big, small. So it really is the chance to connect with the whole ecosystem. And because they're making announcements, also get a feel for what's going on, right? I tend to not go to as many sessions as I do sitting in with meetings, right? Because it's hugely valuable to have those face-to-face meetings. But from what takes place at the sessions, which are covered in many different outlets, right, to the announcements, you also get a feel for what's going to be important, right? What are the messages? Not necessarily what should be important, right? And I think that's the that's the trick there, right? It's sort of saying, this isn't necessarily saying what should be happening in the market, but saying what is happening in the market, right? What's the direction of the key operators, the key vendors, and I think the presence and the reason why you have so many people at the event is the presence of those operators, right? Because they drive the market. Everyone wants to understand what they're looking at, right? Their suppliers they come because their suppliers are there, and you have everyone there together, and that's really valuable. I think I'm in a bit of a different position to the extent that since GMSA Intelligence is the the research and consulting arm of the GSMA, our outputs are everything from before the event, helping with previews,
Yeah.
And that might be either an official GSMA preview or something with our media arm, Mobile World Live, and then afterwards we will end up for our subscribers and our customers on our platform. That's behind the paywall a little bit, like Matt talking about for his subscribers. We'll do a recap of the event, generally focused along the major themes, looking at probably 10 or 12 different technologies, trying to say, look, what moved the market, what didn't move the market, and I think what's critical, at least for my team, is also what should have happened that didn't. I think it's great to say, hey, here's what we saw, here's what happened, but on top of that, like, this is still what needs to be done. This is still how we need to think about it, because it's a great way to get a view of what's happening in the market. I think the analyst role is to say, is that always good or bad? And it is those conversations, like we heard, right? And getting a feel for the pulse of it that helps to form that story.
Absolutely. I think.
May I ask something?
Please, yeah.
Please go ahead, Monica. It's quite interesting to hear what Matt is saying, Peter too, but Matt especially, because it seems like it's a diametrically different perspective than I have, and I actually rely heavily on what people like Matt do. I guess in the analyst sphere, to go and get what's going on. I just try to go and talk to people informally. So I'm pretty much only interested in what's not public, what's not discussed, because that's where Matt comes in, and that's all the hard work. But I think that the chance of having the sort of the informal view of what's going on that is not captured in the keynote speaks, which great. But as Peter said, I don't go to many of them.
Okay, that's good to know. Peter, just going back to something you said about the pre-show information that the GSMA shares, when do you look for inputs from companies that inform that content that goes out? Like, how many weeks in advance do companies need to be sharing their press releases under embargo for you to feature in the GSMA's kind of pre-show content? Can you provide some insight there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think to clarify things, right? My team, GMSA Intelligence, doesn't control or doesn't really roll out the official parts of MWC. So we support those. So in terms of the official side of any GSMA previews, the events team, the media team handle that. I can say probably though similar, and they do a really good job with sending out to folks, here's the deadlines, right? Here's all the sort of things that they do. The media team, I know, have probably already wrapped some of that up as well. I think from my side, from a analyst perspective, it's always important to understand early, in part because as we get pulled into those things, right? We get pulled into by our media team or someone to say, hey, can you help us talk about what's new? Getting info to us, I mean, early and often. I mean, it doesn't. I'm sure it's the same for Matt. I'm sure it's the same for Monica. I've already got some meetings booked, for the event. I've already got some dinners, some socials, some stuff like that. And I'm sure for some folks, it's just they want to get done before the holidays. But early and often, it doesn't hurt, right? And that includes reaching out to talk about strategy and talk about messaging, right? Which should be done by now. I think in most cases, big companies will probably have their messaging plan done, but message testing around that, discussion of what's going to get launched, discussion of how they message that stuff. Yeah, too early doesn't exist.
That's really good, really interesting to know. Okay, so as companies either already starting to reach out to you or considering what they want to say to you and the messaging they're going to present at the show, what are the major trends that are particularly interesting you at the moment and that you want to cover at MWC 24? And Matt, I'll start with yourself.
Putting me on the spot. But yeah, there's a couple of I think are fairly easy and obvious ones. I mean, so I think in the context of what happened with AT&T and Nokia and Ericsson a couple of weeks back with that shift towards Open RAN, which I think surprised a lot of people in a number of different ways. I think there will be a big focus on Open RAN. I mean, I know Open RAN's been discussed at MWC and everywhere else for quite a few years, but I think there's going to be a lot more scrutiny about carrier strategies around it, the kind of single sourcing pivot that AT&T have made, and what's real and what isn't, and actually whether Open RAN is actually going to even be a thing going forward, or is it just going to kind of blur into just RAN again? It's going to be controlled by Nokia and Ericsson and called something slightly different but effectively proprietary. So I think that's going to be interesting. Obviously, kind of connected to that, that there was a lot of noise last year around the kind of cloudification of RAN. I think that's obviously still going to be really important too.
Okay.
And I think well, again, it was there last year, but obviously, environmental considerations are, incredibly important. There was a lot last year around the kind of energy efficiency of RAN products or kind of networking products and cloud products in generally, and I think that will just continue to be a theme too.
Brilliant, thanks, Matt. And how about yourself, Monica?
Well, this year I'm going to be one topic is going to be AI and automation. Just because I'm going to be working on a report at that point. But usually what I try to do is to be the other way around and to ask people what is that they see as major trend, and then be open and see what's going on. Clearly, the evolution of the RAN is going to be an issue. Energy efficiency. As well, there's a lot of talk about 6G, which I don't think is incredibly compelling at this point. I'm interested in risk, so I'm going to be, poking at people, saying, "Oh, are you doing anything there?" Everybody has his own pet things, but mostly I'm going to keep my ears and my eyes open and see what people are thinking.
Okay, and on the point of the automation report you're creating, Monica, what kind of information are you looking for from companies at the show that will help inform that report?
Actually, the most important part is who is working on it for real and who is just still at the PowerPoint stage. So this is why meeting people in person is really important, because you get a sense of, if you get to a webinar and they have a presentation, what their strategy is, what they're doing. But when you talk to a person, you get much deeper and you say, well, are you really, really doing this? Or are you just working, preparing for it? So you get a sense of how much real things are. So this to me is the value of the in-person meetings that are not formal briefings oftentimes. Because with the formal briefings, what I try to do is to schedule them the week before or even the week after. Because there we are, both the company and me, we have more of our brain cells in place and working. Mobile World Congress, I find it very hard to really pay attention to anything at at that kind of level. I'm much better at the social part.
Understood. Thanks, Monica. And Peter, what trends are you particularly looking forward to exploring next year?
I think Monica hits a really interesting dynamic, right? It is that trade-off of going in and going, hey, I'm focused on these topics, which is great, because then you can schedule the right meetings and go in and make sure you're answering all those questions you need, which works, right? Particularly like Maya said, if you're working on a specific piece of research versus just going in, and if you're there to try and find the pulse of the industry, right? So it is a balance of doing both. It's why the show is 4 days long, 5 really if you include day 0, which most people come for. I think personally, yeah, I think Matt and Monica hit the big ones, right? Open RAN and how is it really going to be open versus not? I mean, even something like the AT&T announcement, right? AT&T announced partners they're working with. So to call it single source is disingenuous. On the other hand, we know that a lot of folks think of it that way, right? So big topic and the broader cloudification. Everyone will be talking about AI, right? AI and Gen AI will be this year's metaverse, right? A few years ago, when everyone was talking about metaverse, it's going to be talked about by everyone. It kind of was last year, but we've got to remember, right? The ChatGPT launch was really just December of 2022, and so come around March, most of those messages and stories for MWC were well entrained by then. So I think, there's been more time for everyone to integrate Gen AI into their stories. We're going to hear a lot about it. Monica talked about 6G. I think we're going to hear a lot more this year. Is probably 5G advanced. The specs and standards are really just now, a little over a year away or so. And so I think we're going to hear a lot more about that. Sustainability, of course. My team's actually running summits specifically on sustainability, as well as NTN. NTN kind of fits along with some of what we're seeing on the 5G advanced side of things, but satellite, drone, how do we expand connectivity? And I think those are sort of fun areas. And then last, I think for me, this is going to be, part of the putting my GSMA versus GSMA Intelligence head on. Network APIs. There was a big launch last year of the work with the operators and Kamara around exposing and agreeing on network APIs that could be exposed. I think a year later, we'll see what the progress is and how it's going forward. We just saw some news this last week, right, with Nokia and their deal, and then of course before that the launch in Brazil. So sort of seeing what takes place with that next will be fun.
Great. I think a common thread here is a lot of the big mainstream trends are obviously of interest, but even with trends like Open RAN, which was a major focus for what you probably classify as alternative vendors for a long time, but you're now getting the big heavyweight vendors throwing their kind of towel into the ring and providing offerings in this area. But what can the smaller companies do to get their names heard in relation to some of these big trends that are going to be discussed at the show? I'll put that back to you, Peter.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, one, just making sure that again, it goes back to that early and often briefing. If we're talking to this audience, right, working with this audience to get the story out there, particularly, where we're advising, our customers and, I've got, several hundred operators who read my team's content, getting that story in, as I mentioned, right, part of what we do in the recap is talking about, hey, here was the news that mattered. Here's what kind of changed things. Making sure that the analysts, I know it's the same for, for most analyst firms, making sure that we hear the story, understand the story, can tell the story. It doesn't mean we're going to agree with it, right? Mm-hmm. But where some do and can help explain and drive the visibility, that's important. It's got to be compelling, right? It's got to be a compelling story. And I think that goes along with some of the stuff I'm sure a lot of us are involved in, things like awards, judging, and things like that. One of the things that sort of, if I can connect those two things, I think that's a great opportunity, right? There's some companies that put an incredible amount of effort into those awards. They focus on them. They proudly hold up the Glomo Award when they win it at the end of the it's like part of that. I'm sure it's part of the KPIs for product managers in those companies. And what strikes me, having judged those for years before I've been in this position and now, is just the breadth of quality that goes into that, right? Some people cut and paste marketing materials, pay their entry fee, and they're done. Some people spend a lot of time, and whether or not it's a reflection of the product value, if you spend time explaining why your product is better and innovative, it's probably going to be more likely to win an award, right? And so I think it's just a reminder of companies that want to get their message heard, reaching out, making the contact with the media and the analysts, but making sure the story works and it works for the audience that you're talking to is just, it's just key. It's basic, but it's key.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Peter. Great. Right, I'm just going to put a quick question out to the audience now, and I hope everyone can see this. And I think some of your answers may be influenced by what Peter said earlier in this discussion. Right, let me just quickly see if this is working. Can everyone see? Oh, hold on a sec. Sorry, I don't think that's worked. I'm going to try that again. Sorry, everyone. Here we go. Right, can everyone see that poll in front of them? I hope they can. So when do you typically start outreach to analysts to secure briefings at Mobile World Congress? Is it in December, early early January, late January, early Feb, or the middle of February, right before Mobile World Congress? Give it a sec to get some more responses in. Okay, thanks everyone. Well, it's looking like the majority of people on this call start outreach in early January, and I know Peter, you said earlier that you know, there's a lot of companies now that are already reaching out to you for pre-briefings and to set up meetings. But Monica, when do you think is the best time for people to start reaching out to you to secure meetings at Mobile World Congress?
I completely agree with Peter. The sooner the better. And the reason is that, you know, at the beginning, you're kind of more well, you have an empty schedule at the beginning, right? So it's like, yeah, sure, I can do it. Because most of the time, the invitations are for something you actually want to do. But then as the time goes on, your schedule is so packed that you become much more selective. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a reflection of how interested you are, but how limited your time is.
Yeah.
Now, I would say something for the middle of February crowd, and nobody's going for it. But sometimes, you know, because of that, you do have a little bit of a few holes. I usually keep them open because you never know what's happening. But there might be something that, you know, you might just try and somebody gets in at the last minute. So there is some value to that. But don't plan on it. Don't.
Okay. Yeah.
The earlier, the better.
The earlier, the better. How about for yourself, Matthew? Is it a similar story?
Yeah, it is. You know, every year I kind of have a raging internal battle in my head about, you know, how much I should fill up my diary, so that I know exactly what I'm doing with every minute, or just leave a chunk of time open and just to see what happens. I think, you know, in reality, and I think this is a good thing for smaller companies to be aware of too, is, you know, I have a kind of rough idea in my head, because they kind of do it more or less the same dates and times every year, what the really big companies I'm interested in are going to be doing in terms of their kind of organized analyst tours. So, you know, Ericsson, Nokia, maybe one or two of the carriers, and, you know, nothing in the world is going to shift me from attending those things, because they're super important. So, you know, if you want to maximize the, you know, your window of opportunity with analysts like me, then, yeah, avoid trying to do things that compete with those big set piece events that happen every year. But yeah, you know, every year I am doing real-time calendar updates every day when I'm there, because, you know, things change. You know, thankfully in most cases, you know, people are flexible about, you know, moving slots here or there. You meet somebody, it starts some new interesting thought train in your head that you hadn't really thought about in advance. And so, but then it's always helpful to then be able to go back and say, oh, hang on, somebody emailed me about a company that works in that space a month ago, and you can just go back into it, find it, and, you know, I think usually people are kind of try to be accommodating, and even if you only get 10 or 15-minute chat, you know, over a coffee with somebody, it's better than nothing. So yeah, you know, I always try to keep some flexibility in my diary on a day-to-day basis. Also have to keep some time to actually write something too, you know.
Yeah. Of course. And Peter, you already mentioned that companies are starting to book in meetings, but I expect that you're probably inundated with meeting requests. But what advice would you give to companies that do want to book in meetings with you to get your attention? I guess not just in terms of the messaging or the news they're putting forward, but in the way that they actually contact you. You know, do you prefer to be reached out to over email, or are you happy for people to call you? Any advice you can give that covers all of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think Monica hit it early, and it really is a function of, you know, desire versus time, right? You know, trust me, there may be times when I get to middle of February and be like, I wish I hadn't said yes to that meeting, because now my calendar's full. But you know what? I'm not I assume all of us here are honorable enough that we're going to honor those meetings, whether or not we regret them. Maybe there are other people who are different and basically make excuses. And to be fair, right, I think people, if I have a customer, an important customer who then has a conflict, I will try to reschedule with someone or meet later, do our best, right? But reaching out early is fine. I think email, honestly, it's different for everyone. It's how it works for me.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that works well. I will say, and this is probably doesn't work for everyone, but there are a couple of companies that are all represented by let's say the same PR firm or analyst relations coordinator who try to schedule things in a chunk, and that's actually pretty cool. Right? It's almost every year there's like a 2-hour block, and I see 3 or 4 companies in that 2 hours, and I'm led around by whoever. And these are companies I usually don't talk with, so it's more of a, hey, want to know what's going on. Yeah. But that sort of simplicity really helps. I still haven't figured out, in the same way Matt talks about every year saying he's going to set aside some time. Every year I say I'm going to be better about scheduling meetings. Like, I'm going to do a whole bunch of meetings in hall 4, and then a whole bunch of meetings in hall 3, and I'm going to group that stuff. And I hear that all the time from people that go to CES. Oh, this is the day I just stay in this area. I just can't make that. I've never made that work. Right? It's difficult because you don't know when. So if someone there's a small fortune out there for someone who can develop a scheduling tool that allows us to coordinate all of those things together. I haven't figured it out.
Understandable. And Monica, you mentioned that you like to use the event as an opportunity to meet a lot of companies and be sociable. But how many meetings will you typically book up during that whole show? And is it back-to-back meetings, or do you try and spread them out to give yourself a bit of breathing room?
Okay, as Peter was saying, I just listed down a few the criteria that I have. So actually, the first one is to schedule as few meetings I can get away with. So try to go for the necessary. Do not have any meeting before 10 or 11 a.m. because I want to be at the parties the night before. And I also want to sleep and be present, mentally present when I have the meeting. Don't call me on the phone to make meetings because I don't answer the phone. Keep a Thursday open. A lot of people just leave on Thursday, but for me, Thursday is the day where if I want to meet a smaller company or something that it's a little bit more, I don't really have to, but I can on Thursday because I have time. So for small companies, I would say go Thursday. The other thing is I try to avoid demos and large meetings. So when they just kind of have a bunch of analysts all going together, I start not going to those meetings because I'm an independent analyst. I cover everything, so I have to be very selective. So I want to know who I'm meeting, and it has to be a good quality meeting. And when they have 20 analysts going from one demo to the next, it's usually, I find it a waste of time. Social events are the ones where I make more of the effort going. Again, because then I get to see all the people. It's not too gated, So so those are my kind of criteria.
Great. How about yourself, Matt? How many meetings are you taking every day at the show? You mentioned you do try and get along to some of the talks and panels as well, but roughly how much are you booking in?
It's a good question, mate. I don't know, maybe 4 to 5, maybe. Mm-hmm. Probably not more than that, because it just, as Pete said, by the time you've walked 10 kilometers to get between them all, because they're never next to each other, it gets a bit physically exhausting, and you do need to kind of, have a bit of downtime and, for me, some writing time. What Monica said about Thursday is really important. For the last few years, I go Sunday, quite often quite early in the morning, because there's always a couple of interesting things going on the Sunday, and I stay until the Friday. So that Thursday is a really good day just to go back to Congress and walk the halls in a more relaxed environment. meet some of those smaller companies, follow up with people. So it's a good day.
Great. Good to know, Matt. Thank you. Excellent. Right, I'm going to launch another quick poll. I'm hoping this goes a bit smoother than last time. Great. So the question for our audience is, to what extent do you believe that having an existing commercial relationship with an analyst house influences your inclusion in a report? Give us a second. Okay. So it looks like our audience think that having commercial relationships does moderately influence the potential to be included in reports. But Monica, is there any myth busting to be done there? Is that true? Is it not true?
It is somewhat true. And the reason for that is that I have to sort of, my clients get priority in the meetings, right? Just because they're clients. And so I listen to them more than I listen to everybody else because of that. And that obviously is going to have an indirect impact, not because I want to just, but because you hear more from your customers. And so it's unavoidable. But it's definitely not something that I do on purpose, because that's the whole point, is that you want to be able to represent everybody out there, everything out there.
Yeah. Okay. How about for yourself, Peter?
Yeah, I think the way Monica called it out, I think it's moderately influences is probably it's what I would have expected, and I think it's fair, right? And it is because you have relationships, and to be fair, right, it's they're your customer probably because you're talking about the stuff that they do, you're talking about the stuff that they do, and thus you're probably going to be talking about them, and so it does. I mean, it does make sense. On the other hand, if they're my customer, they're probably also my customer because I'm caring about other companies that are their competitors. So whether or not their competitor was a customer or was one of my customers, I'm still going to be talking about them, right? And so I think, it is a bit of a circle there. But I will say all these companies also do want to know about things that are coming out of left field, right? So I think none of there are very few successful analyst firms where, or I'll say there's very few successful analysts or good analysts who just stay so insular that they only talk to their customers, because you've got to know about what's coming out from other companies. So yeah, I think it is fair, but again, not the pay for play necessarily suggestion that some people might think.
Okay, good to know. What kind of information should companies come prepared with to talk about with you at the show if they do want to feature in a report, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think linking it to what's important in the market, why it's important, that it's part of a theme, not part of a one-off, right? That, hey, this is something that here's how it fits into larger themes, right? It's fairly, I think we know what's driving the market. Explain, hey, here's the role. And from my perspective, right? I mean, so our focus is on operators. It's our biggest customer base. It's obviously who you'd expect my team to be talking to be writing for. Understanding how it impacts their world, why it matters to them, right? Why this changes the landscape for operators and how it helps them, I think is critical for helping us. It's really no different than any other dynamic, right? When you're a vendor out there and you're trying to talk to your customer, you probably want to show your customer's customer, right? Help them be successful, right? Same way, if someone's trying to get into my research and coverage, understanding what I'm covering and how to make understanding where I'm coming from, and that does require some work, right? Whether that's on your own or through a PR or an AR firm, coming prepared. And you see this, right? I see this, the good companies who do PR well, right? I've seen their list, right? They have they're wonderfully prepped. Right. This journalist covers the following things. He's interested in X, Y, and Z. Be careful. He was, bitten by a dog one when he was young, so don't talk about dogs, right? Whatever it is, right? They are super prepared to talk. It's similar, I think, for an analyst firm, right? This analyst is focused on X, Y, and Z, very negative on these topics. So either try and, just being prepared and knowing what we do, and the rest should come easy.
Thanks, Peter. And Matthew, for yourself, I guess going back to that question about commercial relationships and that influencing reports, do you also agree that there's a moderate influence there?
For us, no, because we don't have any commercial relations with anybody, and our whole concept is being completely neutral. What we write is what we mean, and we write it because we think it's important and people need to know about it, not for favour or anything else. So really, if you're talking to me, and it's the same with my journalist colleagues or TV, it's got to be a really clear pitch, and if we use it because we believe that it's important and needs to be shared, and it has some kind of resonance with the kind of investment environment that we work in. But I think kind of picking up on a couple of things, it's really helpful to me. A lot of what Peter said about putting the company or the kind of announcement of the product in the broader context of themes. If they're working with big industry players, if they're part of a new project for Deutsche Telekom or Verizon or something, then make that really clear so you can understand actually, well, this is actually a cog in a much bigger important wheel. I think having specific data points, facts is really helpful. If you've got 100 customers, say you've got 100 customers, if you've got some recent research that says the ORAN market's going to grow by 50%, not the 5% that the other researchers are saying, then make that really clear. So if you've got specific data points that we can anchor a conversation around, kind of probe the company about, that's really helpful. And then it also makes it easy for us to then kind of add visuals to our research, which is also something we're looking to do.
Yeah, makes sense. And I know that analysts are very open to off-the-record discussions, and that can be very useful in terms of setting the wider context and for companies to give you a view of what's coming up in the future. So is that something that you encourage companies to do, and you signpost that clearly to make sure that they do feel comfortable giving you that type of information? And I guess, does that give them a better chance of featuring in reports? Monica, I'll start with you there.
Yeah, I do, and it's usually understood that whenever I have a briefing is confidential, because I don't, if it's not, it's clear, and we do a different type of briefing.
Yeah.
And I do want to have the not necessarily confidential, but really I do appreciate that they go beyond the public information, because if they have a press release, I can read it. And we both save time if we do that. There is no need to go over that. If we have a meeting, we invest a lot of time on both ends. So we don't want to be talking about the obvious stuff. So do not, well, so first of all, people just pay attention for like 5 minutes, which is why a format like one we have today makes sense. You keep people awake. If you go and speak for like 30 minutes, you're wasting your time. I'm wasting my time. It's not good for anybody. So keep it short. Don't duplicate information that is available. Or oftentimes what I see is that people start talking about, the view. Like you talk about energy efficiency and they tell you how it's important. We know that. Let's skip that. Or they go very, very technical, very, very detailed of the new product. And that's not what I'm personally working on, and probably any analyst is working on. So just focus on what makes it different, and both Matt and Peter talk about, what's special, what is it, the other thing that I really absolutely value, that gives a lot of credibility to companies, is when they acknowledge some difficulty. And I don't mean failure or whatever, but it's like we tried to do something and that didn't work, and then we fixed it that way. That to me, speaks volume. That raises the profile of the people I'm talking to, because that means that they trust me and I'm going to trust them, and I'm going to tell them what I think honestly. So we have an exchange that it's valuable and meaningful.
Yeah.
To go over PowerPoint is useless. So that to me is what really matters.
Yeah. How about yourself, Matthew? Do you value off the record information? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of part and parcel of what we do. This goes for everybody. So obviously, we are particularly sensitive to not being recipients of material non-public information. I think everybody should be, because you run the risk of going to jail if you act on it. But in my job, in particular, we have all sorts of compliance regulations, and have to be super vigilant about that. But usually, companies understand the kind of role that people like me work in, and kind of have the conversations accordingly. But off the record kind of background conversations to provide that kind of context around the kind of the black and white words of a press release is really important, just to kind of help really kind of get the proper context for what's being said, and how to interpret it.
Thanks, Matt. And anything to add there, Peter?
No, I think it's always helpful, and I think it's always useful just to be clear up front, right? Saying, hey, this is off the. That's the most difficult part, is when it's assumed but not stated. Like, people have to be very, very clear on that, or else you run the risks. But as long as you have that in place and right NDAs in place, then I think it kind of also goes a little bit to what Monica was saying, was that it builds that relationship, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's not understood, but if you're having a good relationship with an analyst, it is a relationship business, right? You can tell them things, they can tell you things, and I think that, along with saying, hey, here's where we messed up, here's how we're fixing it, it builds that trust that then I'm gonna trust you more, because you're, a big part of your question is, how do you get on the radar, right? And how do you get the attention of analysts? A lot of times people are going to make weird claims, big claims, right? And sometimes they may be right, they may be wrong, they may just be marketing, right? And so a big part of the job is to sort of see through who's saying something that's right versus wrong versus marketing versus, I hope this is the case, and I'm going to tell you it is the case, but it might not be. I just hope it is, right? When people they share that information, it does build that trust, and it lets you know what's real or not, or at least gives you a little more insight into it.
Brilliant, thank you. Excellent. Very conscious that we want to have enough time for the Q&A. So just before we get into that, Monica, Peter, or Matthew, is there anything else that you think our audience might benefit from being aware of that your analyst houses are doing during the Mobile World Congress period, that you want to tell us about?
Only briefly. I mentioned it earlier, but I do kind of communicate directly with my colleagues in news and TV, radio. So yeah, I'm always happy to kind of help facilitate a conversation with them. If you're struggling to if you want to get one of our journalists' attention, or try and get a CEO on an interview slot with the TV guys. I can't promise anything, but always happy to kind of facilitate something.
It's great to know. Monica or Peter, anything?
I would just say on my side, and I mentioned it.
Yeah,
my team's running a few summits. I think we'll probably be tasked with doing some other events. Please check those out on the agenda, but also reach out, right? It's trying to understand how to get involved with things. Yeah, I think we probably all get questions. I get a lot of questions of, ooh, how do we get involved with your summit? Can we speak? And yeah, sponsors of those summits are going to get the speaking slots, because that's what they pay to sponsor it, right? But you never know, right? It doesn't hurt, right? And the time and effort to send an email to say, hey, I think my company would be a great addition. These things fall through, right? Or, and I'm sure we all get these opportunities where someone may say, hey, do you want to moderate this panel? And you know of anyone who would be great for it, right? The throwing it out there for if those opportunities come up for one of us never hurts, right? So getting in contact about those things. Again, I'm running summits, doing other things, I'm sure similar for various folks.
Well, one thing that am I okay? Okay. One thing that I will be doing this year with Chris Lewis is to do some inclusively events. So this is something that we're doing sort of on the side to promote inclusivity in telecoms and to have a discussion. So we're going to have some events around that. This is not part of not commercial. It's more like something that we enjoy doing. This is like for people with disabilities and everybody is excluded. So look out for that.
Will do. Thanks, Monica. Brilliant. Well, I want to open the floor to our audience via the chat function that you should see. So if you do have a question for our panel, please type that into the chat and I'll read it out and hopefully we can get that answered for you. Give it a second so people can hopefully type. We've got an anonymous question here. So my CEO doesn't understand why analyst relations matters. What should I say to him? Peter, I don't know if you want to start with that one.
Wow, that's a good all relations matter. No, it's a good. I mean, it really depends on what the company's goal is, right? I mean, I'll be fair, right? There's probably some companies for which analyst relations doesn't matter, right? You're small, you're a startup, you're really just developing a technology, but even in those cases, maybe a broad analyst relations program doesn't matter. But I think there's a number of reasons why at least I've seen it matter, and I think it works out well. Is one just partly, and this goes to that point of how much does a relationship with an analyst firm get you in their coverage? It is visibility, right? It is helping. It is another conduit to get your message into the market, right? To help your customers. I think there's a lot of firms out there, right? That's what they rely on, right?
Yeah.
They are successful because they have a broad set of customers. If they talk about your product, they put it in the magic fish pond or whatever chart that they have. It's wow, look, I'm part of that, right? And that's helpful. I think beyond that, and it kind of goes to a bit of what Monica was saying. It's also just consultancy, right? I mean, it is you're building that relationship. You're talking about things. You're getting input, right? It's less about I need visibility and more about, hey, I've gotten some input on this launch. And I think some of the best interactions I've had been pre-briefings. Like, we're going to launch this product. Here's what we're going to present. I know that we are essentially a trial run, right? We're a trial run for their spokesperson who is going to not cover some of the right points, cover some in a different way, and you get some input of, hey, you could do this better because your competitor just did something and you're completely ignoring what they did if you don't do X, Y, and Z. So it is also input on your product strategy, your marketing strategy. I think good analysts can help do that. And I think those are really two key things to keep in mind.
Matthew or Monica, do you want to add anything there? Yeah, I think from my perspective, if I was advising a CEO, I'd say it's a two-way conversation. These analysts are meeting all of your competitors and everybody else in your ecosystem. They will have been picking stuff up on background, having context, which is really valuable for you as the leader of your business to understand. It's stuff you're not going to hear directly. If you go and talk to one of your competitors or somebody, they're going to be much more guarded about how they talk to you. So, it's an opportunity to use those to get information as well as give it.
Yeah. May I say something here? Clearly, the CEO in a small company they can go ahead and do the work. Is that the best use of their time? Do they have the skills to do it? And the answer probably is no. I said that, however, it's very important that they choose the right AR. Yeah. Because oftentimes you see that it's not just the right people, they don't really have the experience. So it's not trivial to pick the right one, because if you don't have the right AR, it might be counterproductive. I'm sure Peter and Matt have seen cases where AR is just acting as a filter, as a sort of a negative filter, so they don't give you access and they don't know who to give you access to. So yes, it is important, but it's also important that they get the right one, the right AR support.
Thanks, Monica. I've got another question. How much of your focus is influenced by what is being covered in the media titles you trust? Matthew, I'll start with you this time.
Definitely has an influence. You know, I think in the run up to Congress, you get a lot of kind of information coming at you about who's going to be saying what, why, and how at the event. So it definitely does inform certainly those kind of last minute agenda filling meetings that you decide when you're having to pick between a few what you're going to do.
Peter, anything to add?
I think yeah, it is. It's always helpful for learning about new companies, like Matt said. I think going in though for a broad, like in terms of the focus, I think, right, you already heard from Matt, you already heard from Monica, sort of what they think the focus will be, particularly as we get closer to the event. The media title saying we think this is gonna be a big topic. I just probably don't have time to add anything in, right? I kind of go in, I know a bit of what the focus is. If I don't, I'm doing something like Monica says, going to find out, hey, what do you think the focus is? So I think the media will be interesting, but probably not hugely important.
Okay, good to know. I've got another question in. So, do you think Zoom briefings before Mobile World Congress are a more effective way to share information with you than trying to meet at the show? And if so, how far in advance of the show works best, given how busy you are in the build up to the event? Monica, if you want to.
Yeah, I would say very helpful. And I'd prefer, as I said before, I prefer sometimes to have a Zoom briefing before or after. For an analyst like me, that I'm not covering, I'm not writing news, right? The week after, in a way, it's actually better, or 2 weeks after. They're actually better because then we can talk about what we saw at Mobile World Congress. And it's so much better, because we all can pay attention. And also in-person events the week before my work. Company used to do them before COVID. I wish they'd go back and do them, especially large vendors. Because see, if a large vendor wants to have a whole day or half a day at Mobile World Congress, I'm just, I decline at this point, because I cannot, then I don't do anything else.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
And yourself, Matthew, are you booking in briefings in the weeks in advance?
Yeah, maybe not the week in advance, but sometime before, whether it's kind of one-on-ones or just kind of pre-Congress events. I know some of the bigger companies have done set piece events a few weeks before in the past, and they are helpful because it gives you a flavor of what's going to be themes at the event, so you can kind of prioritize your time there. You get all the kind of the basic hygiene stuff out the way, so you know what's going to be launched and announced. So if there's something particular, if it's a new bit of silicon or a new foldable handset or something, whatever's interesting within the myriad of things that they've announced, you can know, okay, that's the thing that I want to go and find out more about, and you can actually do some prep ahead of time to figure out what it is, what you really want to find out about it. So yeah, those things definitely help.
When's the best time for briefings for you, Peter?
Yeah, before is good. I think things can get pretty busy before, so after also works well. I think after is nice because it can also then be a bit of a, hey, what did you think? Right? What did you see? What did you think? Like, what are our takeaways? Right? It's a bit of a nice roundup afterwards, and so I think after works well as well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, everyone. Well, It doesn't look like there's any further questions. So thank you very much, Monica, Matthew, and Peter. It's been a very informative discussion. I hope the audience has also found it useful. So yeah, thanks very much, guys. We'll see you at the show.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank
Bye-bye.
you. Have a good
Bye-bye.
Christmas. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mhm.